Welcome to the S.O.A.P video series from Oak Tree Community Church in South Bend, Indiana. Last time we started our way through the pretty long book of Ezekiel.
Yes,
We're going to be here for a while.
We are going to be here a while. And so last week, like you said, we started, and I think everybody needs to go back and read chapter 1 again. Just, it's mind-blowing to me how much stuff is in chapter 1.
Time, right?
Yeah, but we were introduced to a priest and a prophet by the name of Ezekiel, and in week 1 we got a view into heaven, and we saw these creatures that we're going to find out soon, are angels or cherubim, and we also found out that God commissioned Ezekiel to be his prophet, and specifically to be his prophet to the hard-headed and hard-hearted remnant of Israel that is living in Babylon.
We're going to see the word rebellious a lot, I think, in upcoming chapters.
Yes, we are. So we're at the time of history where Israel had been split into two nations, or two kingdoms, calling it the Northern Kingdom and the Southern Kingdom. The Northern Kingdom has been overrun by Assyria. It's no longer even there. And now the Southern Kingdom, the same thing is going to happen. And Assyria hit them once. King Nebuchadnezzar came by, and we're just waiting for the end, really. Yeah. And maybe Babylon came by twice so far.
Yeah, Nebuchadnezzar's been by twice. Ezekiel was part of that second one.
Right. So taking people, and now Jerusalem's under a siege, and what's going to happen to them. Yeah. And that's kind of where that's where we are in the history. Yeah. And we need to remember that Ezekiel has been told by God, you will relay my words to the people verbatim, right? No fair. Right. Not telling them, because I'm going to blame you if you do. Right. And, you have to be honest with the people. Yeah. And tell them what he said. Yep. And last week there was some weird things he had to do.
And there are going to be more. Not so much this week, but there will be more. God is going to use him to basically act out these object lessons for the exiles in Babylon.
Right. So what he's trying to do is, these things are really happening in Jerusalem. It's under siege. He's acting it out, and he's not talking. Last week he didn't talk at all, but God is trying to show this is how bad the people have it. Yeah. And Ezekiel's taking the brunt of it to show them. Yeah.
So we pick up this time. We'll do chapters 6 through 10. Right. One chapter a day. Not real hard reading. These aren't, for the most part, these aren't long chapters in Ezekiel. So.
Yeah, there's a lot in there, though.
Oh, there's a lot, yeah.
Right, so Ezekiel's to present God's message to the mountains and the hills. So does this mean he's supposed to be preaching to the hills and the mountains?
Yeah, they don't listen very well, though. I think that's sort of the point, right? Is that you might as well talk to the mountain because the people aren't listening, right? Yeah. Well, obviously, I'm sure it just means all.
Yeah, I was going to say, Israel, right? It seems like, you need to get this message out to everybody. Yeah. And the message is, God is bringing a sword against Israel, and he's going to destroy the high places. Yep. And when we went through the book of 1 Kings and 2 Kings, and we saw that none of the kings were good. And from the standpoint, they always left these high places and let them have idols.
Yeah,
and
even the good kings didn't destroy all of the bad stuff.
Yeah, it was almost, it was like, that's not that big a deal. We're just going to keep it. You're just keeping the economy going, or whatever it is. And God's done.
Yeah, Josiah was really the only one that tried to take care of everything. Right. Even Hezekiah was a good king, and he didn't take care of everything.
He just kind of let it slide. Yeah. So these pagan worship places are going to be totally gone, and altars are going to be destroyed. People are going to die, and God is doing this, and he keeps saying, and you're going to see this in a number of the chapters, so that the people will know that God is Lord.
And I think, you're right. That is this refrain that is going to be repeated throughout. And not just the Jewish people will know, but even the people where they're exiled will recognize. And that's the thing is especially because of the focus on idolatry. The purpose of everything is God's glory. Right? That's God. Everything God does is for his glory. Right. And so what idolatry does is that takes glory away from God and gives it to another person or entity or deity or something. And so in this process of punishing Israel, God is going to punish them for that, but then also reclaim the glory that is rightfully his, both in their sight and the sight of their captors.
Right. Right. I would also say a number of these things are repeated a number of times.
Yeah.
And I think we need to understand that. And it's not from the standpoint they didn't have enough to say that they got to repeat themselves, but it's a reinforcement.
Yeah.
And it's also from a different angle, too. And you get more information or different information more times.
Yeah, he'll say something and then he'll move on to something else and then he'll come back to this one and say it a little bit differently.
Right. Or it'll happen then.
Yeah.
This, is prophesized and then it'll actually happen.
Yeah, that happens a lot throughout Ezekiel.
Yeah.
So another thing I noticed is that, if you're reading through Isaiah or Jeremiah, for instance, it almost, depending on the Bible you're using, it almost looks like it's written in verse, almost poetic type style, right? Prophetic style. This is very much narrative.
Right.
God is talking to him. It's not that, you'll see a little bit of that in here, but it's not there's a really drastic difference between, like I said, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and even some of the other prophets, the minor prophets, and Ezekiel doesn't have that same feel to it.
Right. So in chapter 7, God says, look, the end is coming. And God says he's going to release his anger and the people will be judged according to the behavior and you will be accountable. And you have to question whether you're reading the book of Revelation or reading Ezekiel, right? Because it's similar there. But then you'll know that I am your Lord. And Babylon is so overwhelming that Jerusalem and Judah, they don't stand a chance. There's no way.
Right.
So people are going to die by the sword, or they're going to die by famine, or they're going to die by what they call pestilence, which is part of being besieged and
it's
cooped up
sickness.
for too long.
It's disease, right?
Well, that comes because you can't get out.
Right.
God does say that some of the people will escape to the mountains, but he also is like, we're going to barely make it.
Yeah.
And in fact, he says that people are going to take their treasure with them, their gold and their silver. And you can just picture people, hoarding it when they're running, and they're not going to be able to run fast enough. And at some point, they're just going to drop their wealth and take off.
Yeah.
So much so, the Babylonian soldiers are just going to come by and pick up gold off the street.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Right?
Well, and what's interesting is that you're, especially if you're comparing this to, like you mentioned, Second Kings, Second Chronicles. Where's all this money coming from? I thought most of it was gone by this point.
Well, people, we have our places.
That's right. They haven't found that hiding spot yet.
Yeah. God knows that there's not going to be a difference between the wealthy person and the poor person, right? Because both of them are going to get rid of their wealth.
Yeah.
And then God says he's going to turn his face as his temple is desecrated.
Yeah.
Which is huge. In chapter 8, you have a little note here. We jump ahead.
Yeah. So it says in the 6th year, in the 6th month, on the 5th day of the month. Well, if we compare that to chapter 1, that was in the 5th year of the exile. So this is the 6th year. So we're basically we're jumping a year ahead from chapter 1. What I don't know is how long did chapter 1 through 7 take? Right. Was that spread out over that year and now this is just a time marker? Right. Or what? But another thought that I have along those lines is in chapter 1, Ezekiel tells us that he was 30 years old. Can you imagine a 30-year-old being entrusted with all of this, having to go through all of this? He's married at this point. He's, just all the things that go into this. And, usually you think of prophets as these older people, wiser people, just, gray beard type thing. God picked a 30-year-old priest to be his guy.
So I just went with Ezekiel's wife. How was your work today, honey? Well, God told me.
Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute. God, how do you have that conversation?
Yeah.
And here in chapter 8, Ezekiel is transported in a vision to Jerusalem. I went to Jerusalem today.
Yeah. So this is something really important as we go through. So Two things. First of all, this is a vision. Okay, so what he sees in the vision may be happening, may be symbolic for what is happening. There are some parts that what he sees is not exactly what's going to happen. Okay, so it is. We have to remember that it's a vision. Okay, right. He's not necessarily wasn't necessarily picked up and taken to Jerusalem and dropped down there.
But in some cases we see him being transported by the wind, though.
Yes, so is that part of in the vision, yeah, right? That's the thing, right? Because we'll see at the end of the book, he's in one of these visions again, and he sees the millennial temple. Well, that can't be, because that wasn't back then, right? Second thing is just a reminder to everyone who's listening and reading the difference between visions and dreams. In a dream, it's passive. You have a dream, you're just watching. Right? You may see yourself interacting or whatever, but you yourself are not interacting. In a vision, there is interaction.
Good point.
Right? Talking to people, having questions, digging through. He's going to dig through a wall at one point, that sort of thing.
Right.
So there really is a difference between those two.
Okay. So he is transported in a vision to Jerusalem by God, and he is shown 4 abominations that were happening in Jerusalem.
Yep.
And these were, the first one was idolatry,
yeah,
and we talked about it, how widespread it was.
Yeah.
The second one was a hole in the wall, and the idea with that hole in the wall is it was covering the elders of Judah.
Yeah.
So these elders of Judah seemed to know that they were doing something wrong, were hiding it in a hole, and it was basically their sinful nature.
Yeah.
And God's problem is, you guys are the elders. You guys are supposed to be the leaders of the nation of Israel, and you're as bad as everybody else. How can you?
And it was still linked to idolatry. It was because he dug through the wall, found a doorway, opened the door in his vision, and there are the elders with these idols around them. So even the leaders of Israel it wasn't just the common people. Even the leaders were engaged in idolatry, even if it was in secret. Right.
So you figure the women have to be good, but no. A group of women were weeping for their god in Samaria civilization, which represented vegetation and harvest.
Yeah, it also celebrated
Same way,
death.
Idolatry.
Yeah, that god also celebrated death.
Yeah, and then the fourth one were 25 men sitting in the temple. So these were possible priests. And the odd thing was, and Ezekiel would know, since he is a priest, they were facing the wrong way, and they were worshiping the sun.
So these people in God's temple in Jerusalem, because it hadn't been destroyed yet, that's Nebuchadnezzar's third attack on Jerusalem, and their backs were to the temple. They were facing the east, which is the rising of the sun, and they're worshiping either the sun itself or the sun god, or both. Right. So in all 4 cases, we have idolatry or worshiping other gods.
Right, which, all the same. And at the end of this chapter, and I'll say it in my words instead of God's, this is God saying, here's my proof for how bad things are.
Yeah.
And now, when they shout in my ears, when they have all these problems, I'm not going to listen.
Listening. And that's really a good point, because for several chapters now, God's been saying, they're doing this, they're doing this, they're doing this. Okay, I trust God, right? But it would be easy enough to say, well, are they really doing that? Is it really as bad as, God is making it out to be? He picks up Ezekiel in this vision, takes him over and says, this is what's going on, right? And so, it's like, this is really what's happening. And Ezekiel, when the vision's over, we'll see he's supposed to tell the captives, because he is still in Babylon. This is what's going on, and this is why destruction is still coming. Nebuchadnezzar's not done.
So chapter 9 starts with God shouting in Ezekiel's ear, which certainly could have happened, or can happen, but it's also kind of somewhat humorous in that the verse before, people were yelling in God's ear.
And don't forget, we're still in the vision.
And God yells, approach.
Yeah.
So in the vision, 6 men come up with war clubs. There's also somebody that seemingly is like a scribe. And God's glory starts rising up. And the scribe goes out into Jerusalem, and he's marking people. and you kind of don't know what's going on at first. And then the people with a war club are sent out, and they kill everybody who doesn't have a mark on them.
Yeah.
Right.
So again, this is part of the vision.
Yep.
So Ezekiel sees this and says, "Oh, you're killing everybody off." Okay. Well, yes, Nebuchadnezzar is going to come in, right, and destroy people and everything again, but he's not going to bring 6 men with clubs to do it.
Right.
This is sort of that symbolic sign of things.
Yeah.
But what this shows, though, is that God knows, because he told the guy with the pencil or whatever, the scribe, go through the city of Jerusalem, put a mark on the foreheads of the people who moan and groan over all the abominations practiced. So these are people who are against the idolatry, who are trying to stay faithful to God. And so I love just this picture Ezekiel is seeing. God knows who is faithful and who is not. He's going to protect who is faithful. This is where we get the term is going to be the remnant. And God knows, and he's not going to let the faithful be destroyed with the unfaithful. And I think that's the key that he's trying to make sure that Ezekiel understands.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and Ezekiel somewhat gets it, but towards the end of this chapter, he like you said, he cries out for the number of people being killed.
Yeah.
And God says, God shows how adamant he is about this judgment.
Yeah.
In verse 10, but as for me, my eye will not pity them, nor will I spare them. I hereby repay them for what they have done.
Yeah. Right.
In other words, judgment.
Yeah, Ezekiel's like, oh, you're killing everybody. I'm really not, but I'm not taking pity on those I am.
Right.
Right?
Right. And then in chapter 10, Ezekiel again sees.
This is our throwback to chapter 1, right?
So he sees the angels again, which are a little bizarre.
Yeah.
With the wheel on the bottom and wings and faces up top, and he names them cherub.
Finally, this is the place cherub, where we hear that whether their name or their title or their category or whatever is a cherub, and the plural of cherub in Hebrew, the I am ending at the end of cherub, the cherubim, it's like an S in English. That's what makes it plural. Okay, so cherubim is multiple cherubs. Right.
Okay.
So
these guys, and this seems to be symbolic, but also has maybe does happen. Along with the scribe, they take hot coals, and we've seen hot coals before in the throne room, and spread them over Jerusalem as purification.
Yeah.
So they would have done this as God was leaving.
Well, so we haven't seen God leave yet. That'll be in upcoming chapters, but the fact that usually when we think of fire, coals are going to destroy things. He's not just destroying Jerusalem; he's purifying Jerusalem, right? Because Jerusalem is still his. It's not going to fall forever. He needs to clean it up before he can bring Israel back and everything, though. So I think it's actually positive if you look at it from that perspective.
Yeah, well, it definitely says it's a purification in there. And that's where we end this week.
Yeah, there's a great chapter here in chapter 10. We get these cherubim again, and this is why you said maybe go back and reread chapter 1. And there's a lot of overlap.
To me, and so much happens in chapter 1. It's like, wow.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Now, chapter 11 will pick up right here. We're still in the same vision, so when we come back next time, we haven't really left anything. We'll have to just keep going through this.
Yep.
But
and we go through the same thing from different points of view, too.
Right.
But I think it is a huge buildup to God actually leaving Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Before it falls.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's coming. That's coming next time. But this idea that he's not letting Nebuchadnezzar come in and just take it out without warning, without anything. He's like, you guys know what the problem is. I've been telling you this for centuries.
Yep.
And, the chickens have come home to roost. I mean, it's like, you've done this. I've warned you. And now it's too late. You're not getting out of it at this point.
Right.
And here, like you said, here's the proof of what's going on.
Yep.
So God is a God who keeps his word. And, when someone doesn't change their mind, repent, when they don't go in a different direction, he's going to, continue with the punishment that he said he was going to do. And we see that going on here in Ezekiel. If there are parts of it that maybe you're like, could you explain that a little bit more? Make sure you send those questions over here. And if there's certain parts you say, oh, I'd never seen this. This is so cool. We'd love to hear that too. And so send us your questions and comments. Share this with your family and friends. Make sure you subscribe and have your friends do that as well. We appreciate those. And we will pick up here when we see you next time.
Bye, everyone.